The world beyond the stars had never been kind to humanity, but it had taught them one thing: to keep going, even when everything else had given up. The Astra Nova, a lone deep space vessel, floated silently on the edge of a dying nebula. Its hull shimmered with the reflection of nearby storms of plasma and dust. Inside, only 2 humans remained awake, Captain Alaric Vale and Dr. Ilara Miles. They had been part of a much larger crew once, but after a cosmic radiation burst damaged the cryochambers, only Alaric and Ilara survived the wake cycle. The others were asleep, their fate uncertain. The ship's systems were fragile, the air filters old, and the stars around them seemed to be watching with quiet judgment. Alaric stood at the viewport, eyes fixed on the storm outside. It wasn't like any storm on Earth. This one was made of glowing blue clouds twisting and folding in silence, as if lightning were whispering instead of shouting. Ilara joined him, holding a datapad close to her chest. "It's beautiful," she said softly, "and dangerous." Alaric smiled faintly. "That's space for you." Always a contradiction. Ilara looked at him, curious. "Do you ever miss home?" He chuckled. "Home? Earth stopped feeling like home the moment I left orbit. But yes, sometimes." There was a pause. The hum of the ship filled the silence like a heartbeat. She turned her gaze to the storm again. "You know, my mother used to tell me that real love is like a quiet storm. It shakes everything inside you, but the world outside barely notices." Alaric glanced at her, a soft light flickering in his gray eyes. "A quiet storm, huh? Sounds poetic for a scientist." Ilara smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Science doesn't mean we can't believe in poetry, Captain." For a moment, the cold emptiness of space didn't feel so empty anymore. Hours later, the Astra Nova trembled as waves of radiation from the nebula brushed its shields. Warning lights blinked on the console. Alaric and Ilara rushed to stabilize the power flow. "The reactor's flux coil is overloading," Ilara shouted, fingers flying over the controls. Alaric gritted his teeth. "Bypass the secondary circuit. We'll vent excess charge into the storm." "Are you crazy? That could destabilize the whole ship." "Then trust me," he said firmly, "or we'll burn from the inside before we even know it." Ilara hesitated for half a second, then nodded. Together, they rerouted the energy flow. The ship shook violently as the storm outside absorbed the blast. Lightning-like arcs rippled through the nebula, glowing brighter for a brief, breathtaking second. Then silence. The alarms went quiet. The power stabilized. Ilara exhaled, laughing nervously. "You really are impossible, Captain Vale." Alaric leaned back in his chair, his voice low and steady. "Impossibles kept us alive this long." She looked at him, really looked at him. The rough edges of his uniform, the tired lines under his eyes, the calm in his tone. He wasn't just a soldier. He was human in the truest sense, broken, stubborn, but endlessly enduring. That was the moment something changed between them. Not spoken, not even fully realized, but something began, small as a spark in the dark. Over the next few days, the storm outside grew stronger. The nebula's heart pulsed like a living thing. Radiation waves interfered with communications, leaving the Astra Nova cut off from the human colonies. They were utterly alone, 2 souls adrift in cosmic silence. Ilara spent her hours monitoring energy readings while Alaric repaired the damaged hull panels. Sometimes, when they weren't talking about the mission, they shared stories of Earth. The smell of rain, the taste of coffee, the sound of cities that never slept. "Do you think people will remember us?" she asked one night. "People don't remember names," Alaric replied. "They remember what those names stood for. If we survive this, maybe they'll remember that humans didn't give up." Ilara smiled softly. "That's enough for me." Outside, lightning flared through the blue mist again, bright, silent, mesmerizing. The nebula looked almost alive, but not everything was peaceful. One evening, as Ilara checked the reactor logs, she noticed something strange. The storm's energy signatures weren't natural. There was rhythm, a pulse like language, patterns repeated at intervals that were too structured to be random. "Captain," she said quietly, approaching the command deck, "I think the storm is trying to communicate." Alaric raised an eyebrow. "Communicate? You mean it's intelligent?" "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But these readings, they're not chaos. It's like someone's talking in wavelengths." Alaric studied the data. The ship's sensors were limited, but she was right. The energy wasn't just storm turbulence. It was a pattern, like a song made of radiation and light. What if it's not just a storm? Ilara whispered. What if it's something, or someone, waiting to be understood? The question hung in the air. That night, Ilara couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the storm, its rhythm, its calm violence, the beauty in its silence. She wondered if somewhere in that cosmic sea, a consciousness existed, one that understood the universe the way lovers understood each other, quietly, deeply, without needing words. She thought of her mother's words again, a quiet storm that only lovers understand. Maybe the universe itself was that kind of love, vast, patient, infinite. The next morning, she found Alaric in the observation deck staring out again. He turned when she entered, and for a moment neither of them spoke. I decoded part of the pattern, she said finally. It repeats the same frequency every time the ship stabilizes. It's like it's responding to us. Alaric looked thoughtful. Responding how? Like it knows we're alive. A chill ran down his spine. Humanity had encountered alien life before one, but never something like this. A storm that felt their presence? That was new. Then we need to listen, Alaric said. Whatever it is, maybe it's not trying to kill us. Maybe it's reaching out. They both watched as waves of soft blue light rippled through the nebula again, almost like breathing. For the first time, Alaric didn't see a threat. He saw connection, and Ilara, she saw beauty. The quiet storm whispering secrets in light and rhythm. They stood side by side, two tiny humans against the endless sky, listening to something greater than themselves. It wasn't war. It wasn't survival. It was understanding, a kind of peace that only hearts could feel even in the darkest storm. The astronova drifted in silence, surrounded by waves of blue light that shimmered like a dream. To most people, the storm would have been terrifying, unpredictable, full of strange radiation and capable of tearing a ship apart in seconds. But to Alaric and Ilara, it was becoming something else. It was becoming a voice. For days, they recorded data from the nebula. The energy pulses repeated with almost perfect rhythm, never random, never fully chaotic. The ship's computer couldn't make sense of it, but Ilara believed the pattern was a kind of code. She sat at her workstation, her eyes heavy with sleepless nights. Dozens of holographic graphs hovered in the air, each filled with complex waveforms. Look at this, she said as Alaric approached. The storm reacts when we send a power signal from the ship's reactor. It's listening. Listening, he repeated, frowning. You mean it's aware of us? She nodded slowly. Yes, not just aware, it's responding. He folded his arms. To what? Our energy, she said softly. Our presence. Maybe even our emotions, he raised an eyebrow. You think a storm can feel emotions? Ilara smiled faintly. The universe works in strange ways, Captain. Maybe it feels through energy. Maybe that's its version of language. Alaric sighed, rubbing his temples. We came here to chart a nebula, not talk to one. But deep down, even he couldn't ignore the feeling that something vast and unseen was trying to communicate, reaching out across the darkness. Hours later, they ran another experiment. Ilara adjusted the frequency emitter to send rhythmic pulses into the nebula, short bursts of light that matched the storm's earlier patterns. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ship's sensors detected a reply. The entire nebula flashed once, and soft and bright, almost like it blinked. Ilara gasped. It answered us. Alaric leaned over the console, eyes wide. That can't be possible. But the readings didn't lie. The light waves shifted again, forming a repeating sequence. It's copying our signal, she whispered. It's trying to match us. Alaric stared out at the window. The silent storm looked peaceful, like it had been waiting for them all along. What do we call it? He asked quietly. Ilara smiled. How about the listener? He chuckled. Fitting name. Let's hope it's a friendly one. Over the next few days, the listener began to show more signs of intelligence. Whenever the ship's power fluctuated, the storm would react, calming or growing brighter, almost as if it was soothing the ship. The damaged systems even seemed to stabilize faster whenever the storm's glow grew near. Ilara believed it was trying to help. Every time we lose pressure in the outer hull, she explained, pointing to the data, the radiation levels outside drop for a few seconds. It's protecting us, Alaric listened in silence. The idea was impossible, but undeniable. A storm made of plasma and light was shielding a human ship, adjusting itself to keep two fragile humans alive. He whispered to himself, "Maybe it's not a storm at all." Alara looked up. "Then what do you think it is?" He hesitated, watching the shifting lights beyond the window. "Maybe it's a mind, a consciousness that doesn't need a body." That night, the two shared coffee in the mess hall. The artificial gravity hummed softly and the lights were dim. "You know," Alara said, her voice gentle, "if humanity could communicate with something like this, it would change everything. It would prove that life isn't just made of flesh or logic. It can be emotion, energy, harmony." Alaric nodded. "And maybe it would remind us why we came out here in the first place." She smiled at him. "To explore?" He met her eyes. "To understand." The moment lingered between them, warm and wordless. Outside, the storm's light pulsed softly, as if echoing their heartbeat. The next morning, everything changed. A sudden surge of radiation hit the ship, stronger than anything before. The shield struggled to hold. Alaric and Alara rushed to the control deck. Warning lights flashed everywhere, storm intensity rising. Alara shouted, "The radiation wave is unstable. Stabilize the main shields." Alaric ordered, "I'm trying, but it's too strong." The ship rattled violently. For a moment, Alaric thought it was over, that the Astronova would break apart. But then the storm light changed color. The blue shifted into gold, bright and warm, wrapping around the ship like a cocoon. Radiation levels dropped instantly. Alara froze. "It's protecting us again." The ship stopped shaking. The instruments went still. Then the lights dimmed and a soft hum filled the air. Not mechanical, not natural. "It sounded like music. What's that?" Alaric asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alara's eyes widened as she listened. "It's a pattern. The same rhythm from before, but faster. It's trying to talk again." She recorded the signal and translated it into sound waves. The message repeated 3 tones, low, middle, high. Then silence. Then again. "It's simple," she said. "Almost like it's learning." Alaric leaned forward. "Learning from us," Alara nodded. "It's copying our language structure. Like a child trying to speak." They spent the next 2 days decoding it. Slowly, through careful translation, the storm began to form meaning. Its pulses matched phrases in human speech patterns. The first message they understood was small but powerful. "You, alive." Alara's hands shook as she read it aloud. "It knows we're alive. It recognizes us." Alaric smiled faintly. "Then we should answer." They adjusted the signal emitter and sent 3 short light bursts in reply. "Yes, we live." A pause followed. Then the nebula glowed brighter, spinning slowly in excitement. Alara's voice trembled with emotion. "It understands us." Alaric turned to her, his voice steady. "No, Alara, it feels us." As days passed, they continued their exchange. The storm, the listener learned to express simple ideas: peace, warmth, light, friend. In return, they sent messages like trust, hope, home. It was a friendship written in light. A bond not between 2 species, but between 2 forms of existence. One of matter, one of energy. And yet something deeper began to stir in Alara's heart. She could feel the storm reacting to her emotions. When she was calm, it shone softly. When she was afraid, it dimmed. When she smiled, it sparkled. It was as if the storm itself understood her, not through words, but through feeling. Alaric noticed it too. "It connects to you more than it does to me," he said one day. Alara looked down. "Maybe because I don't just see it as science. I feel it." He gave her a quiet smile. "Then keep feeling. Maybe that's what it's been waiting for." But on the 7th day, something unexpected happened. The ship's scanners detected a massive gravitational anomaly forming inside the nebula. The storm's center, the listener's heart, was collapsing in on itself. Alara stared at the readings. "It's dying," Alaric's voice was grim. "If the core collapses, the shockwave will destroy us." She shook her head. "No, I don't think it's collapsing. I think it's changing." The storm's pulses grew erratic, desperate. Through the static, one final message appeared on the console, translated from the energy pattern. "You. Understand. Come." Ilara's eyes widened. "It's calling us," Alaric frowned. "Into the storm?" That's suicide. But the light outside grew brighter, almost pleading. The entire nebula seemed to be reaching out, not to destroy, but to invite. Alara whispered, "Maybe it wants to show us something. Maybe this is why it found us." Alaric looked at her, at the quiet determination in her eyes, at the reflection of the golden storm on her face. He sighed. "Then we go together." They prepared the ship for entry, rerouting all power to shields. The nebula opened before them, like a blooming flower made of light. As they entered, the ship's hull trembled and everything outside turned white. Alara felt a strange warmth, like a heartbeat pulsing through the ship. For a moment she could almost hear a whisper, not with her ears but in her mind. Not alone. She looked at Alaric. He had heard it too. Then, in the center of that glowing storm, they saw it. Something vast and luminous, shifting in form, made of light and thought. The listener wasn't just a storm. It was alive. It was conscious, and it was waiting for them. The astronova floated in a sea of living light. All around, the storm pulsed like a heartbeat, slow, calm, endless. The walls of the nebula were alive with soft gold and blue patterns, like veins carrying energy instead of blood. It was quiet, but the silence carried a strange music, gentle and full of meaning. Captain Alaric Vale held the controls steady, though his hands trembled slightly. His eyes reflected the light from the storm. Beside him, Dr. Alara Miles stared out the window, her breath caught between awe and disbelief. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Alaric nodded. "And alive." The ship's scanners showed impossible readings, waves of energy behaving like neural signals, as if the storm itself had a mind. The closer they went to the center, the stronger the rhythm became. "It's calling us," Alara said quietly. "We're getting closer to its heart." Alaric's jaw tightened. "Let's see what the universe wants to say." As they reached the core, everything changed. The glowing mist parted, revealing a sphere of light almost as big as a planet. It wasn't solid. It shimmered, transparent and deep, like liquid glass. Inside, something moved, shapes of light that flowed like thoughts. Alara placed her hand on the window. "That's it. The listener." Suddenly, the console flashed with data. Radiation levels, energy spikes, signal bursts. Then came the voice. It wasn't sound. It was vibration, gentle, steady inside their minds. "You found me." Alara's heart skipped. She whispered, "Yes, we found you." Long. Wait. Alone. Cold. Silence. The ship trembled lightly, not from danger but emotion. Somehow, through the soft waves of energy, they could feel the loneliness in the message. Alaric frowned. "How long have you been here?" The reply came in flashes of color, deep blue fading into white. "Before your stars." Before words. Alara's voice shook. "It's ancient. Older than Earth." The storm pulsed again. Many came. None stayed. You stayed. Her eyes filled with tears. "It noticed us because we didn't run." Alaric looked at her. "Maybe humans are the first ones to listen." They opened a two-way link using the ship's transmitter. Alara sent simple messages, shapes, emotions, colors, instead of words. The listener responded in kind. It shared flashes of memory, not in time but in feeling. Images of creation when stars were young and life was new. The listener had been part of that birth, a mind without body, drifting through cosmic storms, watching worlds rise and fall. It had seen everything. But it had never spoken to anyone who truly understood. Until now. Alara could sense its emotion through every pulse, a sadness that stretched across eternity, and a quiet joy that humans had finally heard its voice. Hours passed like minutes. The connection deepened. Alara began to feel something inside her, not pain but warmth. The storm's rhythm was syncing with her heartbeat. Every time she thought, the nebula shimmered, responding like a mirror. "It's linking to me," she said softly. "I can feel its thoughts." Alaric turned sharply. "Is it safe?" "It's not hurting me," she said, smiling faintly. "It's learning what it means to be human." The lights outside shifted into new patterns, not chaotic but elegant. The listener was mimicking human brainwaves. You feel so much. Warm, pain, hope. Alara whispered, "Yes, that's what it means to live. You burn, but still love." A single tear rolled down her cheek. "That's what makes us human." Then the storm dimmed slightly. The energy readings began to fluctuate. Alaric noticed it first. "Ilara, something's wrong. Its core is unstable again." The listener's voice grew faint, trembling. "Too much. Time. Fading." Ilara shook her head. "No, you can't fade now." The lights flickered. The ship's systems went into emergency mode. Radiation levels rose. "Captain, we're inside its collapse radius," she warned. "If the core implodes, we'll be pulled in." Alaric's voice hardened. "Then we have to stabilize it. We owe it that much." He began rerouting the ship's reactor. "If we send power directly into the nebula's center, it might hold its structure long enough to save it." Ilara's eyes widened. "But that could drain our reactor completely. We'd lose propulsion." He met her gaze calmly. "We'll worry about that later." She knew that tone. The same quiet courage she'd seen in him since the day they woke from cryosleep. The courage that made her believe in humanity again. Without another word, she nodded. "Let's do it." They synchronized the ship's reactor output with the nebula's pulse. The engines roared softly and beams of white energy streamed from the Astronova into the storm's glowing heart. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the nebula flared bright gold, so bright it painted their faces in light. "You. Give. Life." Ilara smiled through tears. "We're helping you. Just hold on." The energy levels balanced, the storm stabilized for a few seconds. But the strain was immense. Warning lights filled the cabin. "Reactors overheating," Alaric shouted. Ilara didn't stop. "Keep it going. We're almost there." Outside, the storm swirled faster and faster, its colors shifting like emotion made visible. Through the blinding light, the two humans stood together, tiny, fragile, but unyielding. That was the moment the listener understood them fully. It understood humanity's strange, beautiful defiance, the way they loved in chaos, the way they helped even when doomed, and then it spoke again, clearer than ever before. "You are the quiet storm," Ilara gasped softly. The phrase echoed in her mind, the words her mother had once said. She whispered, "That's what love is. A quiet storm that only lovers understand." The nebula pulsed gently, almost smiling. Then the light began to fade. The energy around the ship softened, growing still. The storm wasn't dying, it was resting. The balance had been restored. Ilara slumped back into her chair, exhausted but alive. Alaric shut down the reactor manually, his voice hoarse. "We did it," she looked at him, smiling weakly. "No, Captain. We all did it." Outside, the storm glowed faintly gold, calm and peaceful. The listener's final message appeared on the screen. "Thank you. Not alone. Always here. Always feel." Then the words dissolved into light. Days later, the Astronova drifted quietly beyond the nebula's edge. Systems were weak but functional. The golden light of the storm still shimmered faintly behind them, like a promise in the distance. Ilara stood at the viewport, watching it fade. "Do you think it's still alive?" Alaric joined her. "Alive, yes. Changed maybe, but I think it'll always remember us." She smiled softly. "It will, and I'll always remember it." He turned to her. "You feel like part of it now." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the stars. "Maybe I am. Maybe we all are. Every human heart is just a small echo of something greater." They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the hum of the ship and the soft rhythm of their hearts. In that quiet, Alaric finally said, "We came out here to find new worlds. Instead, we found something better." Ilara tilted her head. "What's that?" He smiled faintly. "Proof that even the universe can feel." She laughed gently, a sound that filled the cold air with warmth. Maybe the universe just needed someone to listen. As they set course for home, the nebula shimmered one last time, a soft pulse, like a heartbeat. It wasn't goodbye. It was understanding. The listener had found love not through words, but through silence, through two humans who refused to turn away, who faced the storm and heard its song. And somewhere deep in that endless light, the ancient consciousness whispered into the stars. They met in the quiet storm that only lovers understand.